I never thought I'd be the kind of man to spy on my wife. It's the kind of thing you read about in advice columns or hear in hushed whispers at barbecues. But the signs had been piling up for months, small inconsistencies that didn't add up no matter how hard I tried to rationalize them. Sophia was my everything. Beautiful, ambitious, and sharp as a blade. We had met during a tech startup networking event 6 years ago. I was the nerd pitching a buggy app, and she was the PR manager who saved me from a disastrous presentation. We married 2 years later, building a life around shared dreams. But lately she'd been different. The late-night text notifications she brushed off with a just work excuse. The mysterious phone calls that ended the moment I walked into the room. And then there were the disappearing acts on weekends, gym sessions that stretched into hours, dinner plans that just came up with her coworkers. I told myself I was paranoid, that the pressure from my new role as CTO at a rapidly expanding startup was clouding my judgment. But when Sophia missed our anniversary dinner, claiming an urgent client meeting, something snapped. That night I sat in my office surrounded by glowing monitors, debating whether I should act on the suspicion gnawing at me. My skill set had always been my curse as much as my gift. With my expertise, planting spyware on her phone would be child's play, a line crossed with a single keystroke. I told myself I wasn't looking for trouble. If anything, I wanted proof that my fears were baseless, a way to silence the voice in my head, whispering that something was wrong. I waited until Sophia fell asleep, her breathing slow and even. Her phone was on the nightstand, the screen still lit from a message she hadn't replied to. I slipped it into my hand, careful not to wake her, and connected it to my laptop. Within minutes, I had installed a discreet monitoring app. It was invisible, untraceable, and capable of logging everything: texts, calls, emails, GPS locations. The next morning, as Sophia kissed me goodbye and left for work, I sat at my desk, staring at the dashboard of the Spyware app. My stomach churned as I clicked the refresh button. Her texts seemed normal at first: work-related conversations, group chats about wedding plans for her best friend. But then, buried among the mundane, I found a name that didn't belong: Eric. The messages were flirtatious, teasing remarks, inside jokes, plans for next time. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. Eric, can't stop thinking about you. Sophia, same here. Last night was incredible. When can we meet again? My heart sank. There it was, the confirmation I dreaded but half expected. She was seeing someone else. For the next few days, I acted as if nothing had changed. I smiled when she came home, asked her about work, and kissed her goodnight. But inside, I was unraveling. The spyware fed me a constant stream of information. Location pings from a hotel downtown, calls that lasted hours, photos exchanged that made my blood boil. Each piece of evidence added weight to the growing knot of betrayal in my chest. But as I dug deeper, I began to notice something odd. Among the flirtations, there were mentions of me, specific details about my routines, my work schedule, even the location of my safe at home. At first, I chalked it up to pillow talk, but the more I read, the more it seemed calculated. Then came the text that changed everything. Eric, did you get the blueprints? Sophia, working on it. He's been suspicious lately, but I'll handle it. Blueprints? My stomach twisted. What were they talking about? I scoured the app for context, but the conversation was fragmented, spread across messages and encrypted emails. The pieces didn't fit until I intercepted a file Sophia had sent to Eric. It was a floor plan. Not just any floor plan, my company's headquarters. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just an affair. This was something much worse. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. The floor plan of my company's headquarters was unmistakable, marked with notes in Sophia's handwriting, entry points, security camera blind spots, and even the location of the server room were all highlighted. This wasn't just casual snooping. It was precise, calculated, and damning. I leaned back in my chair, piecing together the timeline. For months, Sophia's absences, late-night calls, and secretive behavior had coincided with the rollout of our company's most sensitive project, a proprietary AI framework set to revolutionize cybersecurity. It was the crown jewel of our work, one that had attracted interest from competitors, government agencies, and evidently, my wife. I couldn't confront her outright. Not yet. If this was a conspiracy, barging in without proof or a plan would only alert them. I needed more. Details, evidence, anything that would expose their scheme. I turned my attention to Eric. Who was he? How had he managed to pull Sophia into this? Using the spyware, I traced his phone number, emails, and even social media profiles. Eric Ross, 38 years old, was a self-described business consultant with no fixed employer and a penchant for luxury cars and exotic vacations. His Instagram was a gallery of yachts, expensive dinners, and cryptic captions like, "The game's only fun when the stakes are high." It didn't take long to discover the darker side of his life. Eric was linked to a series of corporate espionage cases, none proven, but enough whispers to paint a clear picture. He was a thief, a con artist, who seduced his way into companies through people like Sophia. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that Sophia had been manipulated, or worse, willingly complicit. Over the next few days, I monitored everything. Sophia's messages to Eric grew bolder, discussing the final steps of their plan. Eric, once we have access, it's game over. Sophia, he's taking the bait. I'll get the passcodes tonight. Passcodes? My mind raced. The only thing worth that level of effort was our server database, which housed not just our project but sensitive client data. If they breached it, the fallout would be catastrophic. For me, for the company, for everyone. I knew I couldn't go to the police yet. Without solid proof, they'd treat it as a domestic dispute or, worse, jeopardize my standing in the company. Instead, I decided to play their game. That evening, I kept up the facade as Sophia cooked dinner. She hummed softly as she chopped vegetables, her usual ease a stark contrast to the duplicity I'd uncovered. "Busy day?" I asked, testing her reaction. She didn't flinch. "Exhausting. The client meeting ran late again." I nodded, sipping my drink. "You've been working so hard lately. We should take a weekend off, just the two of us." Her smile wavered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "That sounds amazing. Let me check my schedule." Her schedule. Code for Eric's plans, no doubt. Later that night, as Sophia slept beside me, I retrieved my laptop and set my counterattack in motion. First, I created a dummy file disguised as our AI project. It was convincing, layered with just enough jargon and dummy code to appear legitimate to someone like Eric, who wouldn't know the difference. Next, I set up a honeypot, a digital trap that would alert me the moment anyone accessed the fake file. Finally, I planted a tracker in the real server. If they managed to bypass the honeypot, it would lead them straight to the tracker, logging every move they made. The following day, Sophia was unusually affectionate. She kissed me goodbye with a tenderness that felt almost mocking in hindsight. "Don't work too hard today," she said, her hand lingering on my shoulder. I smiled, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "You too." As soon as she left, I activated the Spyware dashboard. Her location pinged within minutes, her car heading downtown, far from her office. It didn't surprise me. What did was her destination, a high-end apartment building that I immediately recognized from Eric's social media. She was going to him. I grabbed my keys and followed her, keeping a safe distance. My heart raced as I parked down the street and watched her enter the building. She carried a small bag, her posture confident as if she had nothing to hide. For hours I waited, my mind racing with possibilities. What were they planning? Would tonight be the night they acted? When she finally emerged, it was past midnight. She looked calm, collected, like someone who had just sealed a deal. I followed her home, my mind boiling with rage and questions. Whatever they were planning, it was coming to a head, and I needed to be ready. The following morning, Sophia acted as if nothing had happened. She hummed while making coffee, scrolling through her phone as I pretended to read the news. She glanced up occasionally, smiling at me like the devoted wife she wanted me to believe she was. But I couldn't stop replaying the events of the previous night in my head. Watching her walk out of that apartment building so composed, so confident, it made my stomach churn. Whatever she and Eric had planned, it was moving forward and fast. I checked the Spyware dashboard as soon as Sophia left for work. Messages between her and Eric confirmed my worst fears. Sophia, everything's ready. Tonight's the night. Eric, perfect. He won't know what hit him. I froze. Tonight. They were planning to act tonight. My mind raced as I tried to piece it all together. If the floor plans and passcodes were any indication, they were targeting the server room at my company. That much was clear, but the stakes felt bigger than simple corporate theft. The meticulous planning, the cryptic mentions of blueprints, and the fact that Sophia had risked everything to be part of this, it all pointed to something far more sinister. I spent the day preparing. My first move was to warn the IT department at work about a potential breach, framing it as a general security drill. I didn't name Sophia or Eric. I needed them to walk into the trap without realizing I was onto them. Next, I secured my home. If their plan involved me directly, I wasn't taking any chances. I changed the safe's combination, installed motion detectors in the house, and hid a recording device in the living room. By the time evening rolled around, I felt ready, or as ready as I could be under the circumstances. Sophia came home around 6, carrying takeout and wearing an air of nonchalance that made my blood boil. I figured we could have a quiet night in, she said, setting the food on the kitchen counter. I forced a smile. Sounds perfect. She kissed me on the cheek and disappeared upstairs to change. I watched her go, my hands gripping the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. We ate in silence, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Sophia made small talk about work, but I could barely focus. Every word felt rehearsed, every glance calculated. Around 9, she claimed she had an early meeting and went to bed. I stayed downstairs staring at my laptop and refreshing the Spyware dashboard. Sure enough, the moment she was upstairs, her messages to Eric began pouring in. Sophia, I'm heading out in 30. Is everything set on your end? Eric, ready and waiting. Remember the plan. The plan. I gritted my teeth and waited. At exactly 11 p.m., Sophia crept downstairs. I heard the faint rustle of her jacket and the soft click of the front door closing. Within seconds, I was out the door, following her. Her car led me downtown to the same apartment building she'd visited the night before. She parked, walked inside, and didn't look back. I waited for 10 minutes before slipping out of my car and following her. The lobby was empty, save for a security guard who barely glanced at me as I entered the elevator. I'd memorized Eric's apartment number from his social media posts, 802. The hallway on the 8th floor was eerily quiet. I crouched by the door, straining to hear their conversation. Sure he doesn't suspect anything? Eric's voice was smooth, confident. Sophia laughed softly. He's clueless. I told you, I've got this under control. Good, once we're in, we take what we need and disappear. He'll be the one holding the bag. My heart raced. They weren't just planning to steal from the company. They were framing me for it. Are you sure you can handle him if things go south? Eric asked. Sophia's voice dropped. I've handled worse. Trust me, this isn't my first time. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. Not her first time? What the hell did that mean? As I processed her words, the sound of footsteps startled me. I scrambled back toward the elevator, hiding in the shadows as the door to 802 opened. Sophia and Eric stepped out, carrying a laptop bag and a bundle of papers. This is it, Eric said, grinning. By tomorrow, he'll wish he'd never married you. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. They were heading to my office and I had one shot to stop them. I followed Sophia and Eric from a distance as they drove toward my office. The streets were nearly empty, their taillights glowing like embers in the darkness. My chest tightened with every mile. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about survival. They weren't just stealing from me. They were setting me up to take the fall. My heart pounded as they pulled into the parking garage of my office building. I parked a block away, slipping out of my car and jogging toward the entrance. The late hour worked in my favor. The building was nearly deserted. I slipped inside through a side entrance, using my employee badge to bypass security. The hallways were dimly lit, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing around me. My mind raced as I tracked their footsteps through the Spyware app. They were heading for the server room, just as I'd suspected. I moved quickly but carefully, avoiding the main corridors and sticking to the shadows. My heart hammered in my chest as I approached the server room door. I could hear their muffled voices inside. Disable the firewall first, Eric was saying, then upload the files. Once that's done, The tracking software will do the rest. And you're sure it'll look like he did it? Sophia asked. Eric chuckled. Absolutely. His login credentials, his IP address, it'll all point to him. By the time anyone figures out the truth, we'll be long gone. I clenched my fists, rage boiling inside me. How long had they been planning this? And how had Sophia become so cold, so willing to destroy me for her gain? I needed to act, but I couldn't just storm in. If I caught them in the act, I'd have the leverage I needed to expose their plan. Quietly, I positioned my phone's camera through the small gap in the door, recording everything. Inside, Eric was hunched over a laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Sophia stood nearby, her arms crossed, watching intently. Done, Eric said after a few minutes. Now we just need to plant the fake emails on his account. Sophia smirked. Let me do it. I know his passwords better than he does. The casualness of her betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. She didn't even hesitate. I decided it was time. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Going somewhere? I asked, my voice calm despite the fury bubbling underneath. Sophia and Eric froze, their faces a mix of shock and panic. Liam, Sophia stammered, her eyes wide. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I said, stepping closer. But I think I already know. Eric recovered first, straightening and putting on a smug smile. You shouldn't be here, man. This is just a misunderstanding. I laughed bitterly. A misunderstanding? Is that what you call framing me for corporate espionage? Sophia's face turned pale. Liam, it's not what it looks like. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't insult me by pretending there's an innocent explanation for this. Eric stepped between us, his smile turning predatory. Look, why don't you just walk away? No one has to get hurt here. I held up my phone, showing the recording I'd made. Too late for that. I've got everything on tape. The emails, the passwords. Your plan to pin this on me. You're not going anywhere. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Eric lunged toward me, his hand outstretched to grab my phone. I dodged, shoving him backward into a desk. The laptop he'd been using crashed to the floor, its screen flickering. Liam, stop, Sophia screamed, but I wasn't listening. Eric came at me again, his movements wild and desperate. We grappled, knocking over chairs and scattering papers across the room. Finally, I managed to pin him against the wall, my forearm pressing against his throat. You think you can ruin my life and just walk away? I hissed. Liam, let him go, Sophia pleaded, pulling at my arm. I released Eric, shoving him away. He coughed, rubbing his neck, but I kept my phone trained on him. This ends now, I said, my voice low and steady. I'm taking this to the police. Both of you are done. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Liam, please. Save it, I snapped. You made your choice. Eric glared at me, his bravado fading. You think you've won? This isn't over. Oh, it is, I said, backing toward the door. And if you come near me or my company again, I'll make sure you regret it. With that, I turned and walked out, my hands trembling, but my resolve unshaken. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my thoughts racing in 100 directions. I just exposed their plan, but the adrenaline coursing through me didn't feel like victory. It felt like the calm before an even bigger storm. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was silent. The stillness was suffocating as I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. I left the lights off, leaning against the wall and letting out a shaky breath. Sophia's betrayal hit me in waves. Every detail of her deceit replayed in my mind. Her furtive messages, the whispered conspiracies, the way she'd stood beside Eric in the server room like they were partners in crime. And now she was coming back to this house, to the life we'd built together, as if nothing had changed. I couldn't let that happen. I uploaded the video to my secure cloud storage, creating multiple backups. The evidence was irrefutable, but I wasn't naive. Sophia and Eric were desperate, and desperate people could do reckless things. At 2 a.m., I heard her car pull into the driveway. My heart pounded as the front door creaked open. She entered quietly, her movements hesitant, as if she knew I'd be waiting. Liam, she called softly. I stepped into the living room, the glow from my phone casting shadows across the walls. Sophia froze when she saw me. "You're late," I said, my voice cold. She swallowed hard. There was a lot going on at work. I didn't want to wake you." "Work," I repeated, the word dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Her eyes darted toward the stairs, but I blocked her path. "We need to talk," I said firmly. She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let's talk." We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us feeling like a chasm. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Liam," she began, her voice trembling. "I know you're upset, but—" "Upset," I interrupted, laughing bitterly. "Sophia, you were in my office tonight. With him. Stealing from me." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." I held up my phone. The video paused on a frame of her standing beside Eric. "Don't lie to me," I said. "I have proof." Her mask cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked away. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "Then what was it supposed to be?" I demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were trying to ruin me." "It's not that simple," she said, her voice barely audible. "Then make me understand," I snapped. "Tell me why you did it, why you chose him over me." She looked at me then, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "Because you weren't paying attention, Liam. You were so wrapped up in your work, your company, that you didn't even see me anymore." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, struggling to process what she'd just said. "So this was revenge?" I asked, my voice hollow. "You wanted to hurt me because I work too much?" Sophia shook her head. "It wasn't revenge. Eric, he made me feel seen. He made me feel alive." I stood abruptly, pacing the room. "And what about the plan to frame me? Was that his idea, or were you just as eager to watch me fall?" She flinched, the tears spilling over now. "It wasn't supposed to go that far, I swear. Eric, he convinced me it was the only way." "And you believed him," I said, my voice breaking. "After everything we've been through, you trusted him over me." She didn't respond, and the silence was deafening. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep my emotions in check. "This is over, Sophia. I'm taking this to the police." Her head snapped up. "No, please, don't. If you do that, I'll lose everything." "And what about me?" I shot back. "You were willing to destroy my life without a second thought. Why should I protect you now?" Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Eventually, I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her alone in the dark. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized there was no going back. Sophia wasn't the woman I thought I'd married. She was a stranger, someone who'd let greed and resentment consume her. And now I had a choice to make: pursue justice or walk away and start over. Neither option felt like a victory. I didn't sleep that night. Sophia's sobs echoed faintly from downstairs, but they didn't stir pity in me. My thoughts were consumed by the betrayal, the lies, and the chaos she and Eric had unleashed. When the first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, I finally moved. My mind was clear now, my path forward set. Sophia had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. By 8 a.m., I was in my lawyer's office. The building's polished floors and mahogany furniture felt like a strange setting for this kind of conversation, but I didn't care. I explained everything: how I'd discovered the spyware evidence, the confrontation at the server room, and the video recording I'd taken. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Valerie, listened carefully, jotting down notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You have a solid case," she said. "The video alone is damning. If we present this to the authorities, they'll open an investigation." "And what happens to Sophia?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Valerie gave me a sympathetic look. "That depends. If she cooperates, she might get a reduced sentence. But Eric? He'll face the full brunt of the charges." I nodded, the reality sinking in. "What about my company? How do I make sure this doesn't ruin us?" She smiled faintly. "That's where we play offense. If we act quickly, we can release a statement about discovering and thwarting the breach. Frame it as a success story for your company's security protocols. It won't erase the damage, but it'll control the narrative." After leaving Valerie's office, I headed to the police station. Filing the report felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unravel on a screen. But as I handed over the video and explained the situation, a sense of control began to return. The detective assigned to the case, a gruff man named Carter, assured me they'd act swiftly. "With this evidence, we can issue warrants for both of them," he said. "Don't worry, we'll handle it." I wanted to believe him, but a part of me knew this was far from over. When I returned home, Sophia was in the kitchen, her eyes red and puffy. She looked up as I entered, her face a mix of guilt and fear. "Where were you?" she asked hesitantly. "At the lawyer's," I said bluntly. "And the police." Her face went pale. "Liam, no! You don't have to do this. We can fix this." I laughed bitterly. "Fix this? Sophia, you betrayed me. You tried to destroy my life. There's no fixing that." Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but I love you. Can't we start over?" Her words might have moved me once, but now they felt hollow. "You didn't love me when you were plotting with Eric. You didn't love me when you stood in that server room and smiled while he framed me." She fell silent, her sobs racking her body. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the pain she'd caused, the lies, the betrayal, the risk to everything I'd worked for. The next few days were a whirlwind. The police executed a search warrant on Eric's apartment, seizing laptops, documents, and other evidence. Carter called to inform me they'd found incriminating files that corroborated my claims. Sophia, meanwhile, was in a state of denial. She spent hours pacing the house, begging me to reconsider, but I barely acknowledged her. The sight of her filled me with equal parts anger and sorrow. One evening, as I was reviewing damage control plans with my team, Carter called again. "We've arrested Eric," he said. "He was caught trying to leave the city with a suitcase full of cash. Looks like he planned to cut and run." "And Sophia?" I asked, my voice tight. "We've interviewed her. She's cooperating, but she's implicated in enough to face charges. It'll be up to the prosecutor to decide how lenient they want to be." Hanging up the phone, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The battle was over, but the victory didn't feel sweet. My marriage was shattered, my trust destroyed, and the life I'd known irrevocably changed. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. The smiles in the picture felt like a cruel mockery of the present. Sophia walked in, her face pale and gaunt. "Liam," she said quietly, "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry. For everything." I looked at her, searching for sincerity in her eyes. Maybe it was there, or maybe I was imagining it. "I'm not sure sorry is enough," I said. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I understand." The next morning, Sophia packed her things and left. Watching her drive away, I felt a pang of sadness, but also a glimmer of hope. This wasn't the end. It was a chance to rebuild, to start over. The morning after Sophia left felt eerily quiet. The house, once filled with her presence, now seemed larger, emptier. I wandered through the rooms, pausing in the living room, where the wedding photo still sat on the mantel. For the first time, I didn't feel anger looking at it, only a deep, aching sadness. Life moved forward, though it felt strange to wake up without the weight of her betrayal pressing on my chest. The legal proceedings against Sophia and Eric gained traction quickly. Detective Carter kept me updated. Eric's cache of evidence was extensive, implicating him in several other cybercrimes. Sophia, on the other hand, had provided a statement admitting her role in the plot. Her cooperation earned her a plea deal, sparing her a prison sentence, though she'd face hefty fines and probation. Valerie and I worked tirelessly to repair the damage to my company's reputation. She arranged a press conference where I detailed how the breach had been uncovered and thwarted. I framed it as a cautionary tale about trust in cybersecurity, a way to transform my pain into a lesson for others. The media ate it up, dubbing me a tech hero for protecting my company from an insider threat. It wasn't the narrative I wanted, but it was the one I needed to keep the business afloat. Months passed, and slowly, life began to feel normal again. I buried myself in work, pouring my energy into new projects and innovations. The distraction was welcome, but it couldn't erase the nights when I lay awake, haunted by memories of Sophia's betrayal. I tried therapy, something I'd never considered before. Talking to a stranger about my pain felt strange at first, but it helped. My therapist, Dr. Patel, guided me through the tangled emotions of anger, grief, and self-doubt. It's okay to feel betrayed, she said during one session, but don't let that betrayal define you. You're more than what happened to you. One evening, months after everything had settled, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a small canvas, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. I unfolded it to reveal a painting of a serene landscape, rolling hills bathed in the warm hues of a sunset. The note attached was from Sophia. Liam, I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted to give you something that reflects what I wish for you. Peace. Thank you for the years we shared, even if I didn't appreciate them the way I should have. Sophia. I stared at the painting for a long time, emotions swirling. I didn't respond to her note, but I hung the painting in my home office, a quiet reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd gained. As the seasons changed, so did I. I reconnected with old friends, joined a local running club, and even started dating again. Each step felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried beneath the weight of betrayal. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker below, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Sophia's actions had hurt me deeply, but they hadn't destroyed me. I'd survived, rebuilt, and emerged stronger. The day I finalized the sale of my company was bittersweet. The business had been my life's work, but letting it go felt like closing the chapter on a painful part of my past. With the money from the sale, I started a new venture, one focused on helping small businesses protect themselves from cyber threats. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was personal. Looking back, I can't say I'm grateful for what happened, but I've come to terms with it. Life is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, but it's also resilient. As I stood before a packed conference hall one evening, delivering a keynote speech on cybersecurity, I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Detective Carter gave me a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of how far I'd come. When the applause filled the room, I smiled, not for the audience, but for myself. This was my story now, and I was finally in control.